One of the 10 commandments is to not commit adultery. But in Surah An-Nisa, ayah 24 and 25, you are given a means by which you can be married to a woman, but you can still bed in somebody who is your slave, which would be adultery because you are married to a woman and then you are still having intercourse with somebody who is not your wife.
Can I respond to that?
So somehow you are allowed in certain cases to go outside of the law of Moses. For example, and there's different dietary requirements, but go ahead and respond to that if you want.
Okay. So when you talked about we are given permission to commit adultery with a slave or whatever, there's nothing like that in Islam. And I want you to understand something, that God dictates law. He will tell us what constitutes adultery or what does not constitute adultery. During the time of a slavery period, Islam says that whoever is captured as a slave, you lose all your rights. Not only in Islam, all culture, all religion believe that once you are captured as a slave, you jettison that right. And in Islam, a slave is regarded as a brother, not as somebody you just use anyhow. But Islam gives those warriors that goes to the war to integrate those slaves into the community. So a slave becomes a guardian, a master becomes a guardian to a slave. For example, if you have a woman and she's your slave, Islam says you are the guardian of that person. In fact, it is just like the state has married that person to you. You can choose to have an affair with her, and that is why generally everybody knows that if you are married to a slave, if you have a slave, you have the right to consummate or have a relationship with him. That is not adultery. But for example, during that period, if your wife has a slave and you go and sleep with the slave of your wife, that is adultery. But your own slave in Islam, and according to the opinion of God, he says it is not, because it is sin to you as being married to you. And if you are even raising that kind of slavery, you find something like that in the Bible itself. If you go to Deuteronomy chapter 21 verse 18, when a slave is captured in war, what did the Bible say to us? He said you have to have sexual relationship with the woman to know whether you are going to marry her or not. If you don't enjoy the sexual relationship with the woman, you can ask her to go. The only way you can know whether she can become your woman or not is to first experience sexual relationship with him. And that is why at the end of that passage it says, when you are leaving the woman, do not sell her, because you have humiliated her. You have humiliated her. This is the idea they have, that when you capture a slave, they are no longer free. Once a slave is assigned to you, it is like the state has married the two of you. If you desire, you can marry the person, you can sleep with her. If you desire, if you want to marry her out, you can marry her out. So in that civilization or in that culture, people don't see a master having sexual relationship with a slave as being committing adultery. And when God says something is not adultery, human being cannot redefine it and say it is adultery.
So ultimately, it is still definitionally adultery regarding to the 10 Commandments, because a man in Islam, according to Surah An-Nisa 24 and 25, they don't have to necessarily marry their slave before they have sex with them. And additionally, if it was a woman who was married to a man and had a male slave, she wouldn't be able to go and have sex with a male slave, because there would be a problem there. You might say it's because she can get pregnant, but then what about today when we have contraception? Is she then suddenly allowed to go and sleep with her male slave? You would still tell me no. Regarding Deuteronomy and its relationship to Numbers 31, in Deuteronomy, you cannot sleep with a slave before you marry them. You shave their head and then you allow them to mourn. This is in Numbers 31. And then you take them as a wife. In Deuteronomy, after that month elapsed, if they don't wish to marry you, then you set them free, because you have embarrassed them. You have made them shave their head. not that you made them sleep with you, because that would go directly against Numbers 25, where the very reason why God tells them to go and attack the Amalekites is because the Amalekite women have been enticing the men of Israel into sexual immorality, and it has resulted in a plague.
It says here.
So there is nothing in the Old Testament that tells you that it is not adultery to sleep with a slave who you have not married. But that's just an example that I'm giving you of the dichotomy between you as a Muslim, what you hold to be true and from God, and what the Jews were. So you also believe ultimately in replacement theology. Another example is the changing of the direction of prayer. Again, the Jews will accept that, but then you have to.
Okay, I will first of all like to read what you said in Deuteronomy to prove my point that what the Bible says there is that before you can even take the woman as your wife, you need to first of all sleep with her.
No,
no, we're going to read it. We're going to read it. So I'm not making this up. Okay. But I just want to say, when you talk about replacement theology in Islam, I am still telling you that it is still the law. God is still telling you to comply with the law. The law can be modified, depending on the circumstance, but it is still about the law. So it is not replacement.
Okay, then the law of Moses.
Listen, it is not the law of Moses because Moses was specifically sent to the children of Israel. Moses was not sent to the entire world, and that was why during the time of Jonah, when the people of Nineveh, when they committed sin, God did not subject them to the law of Moses. They were subjected to the Noahide law. That is the common law, because the law of Moses is specifically for the children of Israel, not people outside the children of Israel. And as for the case of Deuteronomy, let us read this. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, I would like to read from verse 10 to verse 14. It says, when thou goest forth to war against thy enemy, and the Lord thy God hath delivered them into thy hand, and thou hast taken them captive, and seest among the captives a beautiful woman, and hast a desire unto her, that thou may have her to thy wife. Then thou shalt bring her home to thy house, and she shall shave her head and pare her nails, and she shall put the raiment of her captivity from off her, and shall remain in the house and bewail her father and mother a full month. And after that, thou shalt go into her. Listen, thou shalt go into her. Meaning, after this period, you shall have sexual relationship with her. And he said, and she shall be your wife. She shall be your wife. After having sexual relationship with her, she shall be your wife. But you are going to understand why she should be his wife in the next verse. And he said, if thou hast no delight in her, after this sexual relationship with her, you don't enjoy her, then you shall let her go wherever she wants to go. But thou shalt not sell her for money, because you have humiliated her. And the reason why he says you have to sleep with her, if you enjoy it, then you will marry her. But when you sleep with her and you don't enjoy it, tell her to go, but don't sell her, because if you sell her, the reason why you cannot sell her is that you have humiliated her. And the word you use there is that you forced her to sleep with her without her consent. So I'm saying here that the sexual relationship comes first before she can become your wife or not become your wife.
Incorrect. So ultimately, the series of events are such. Number one, if you go into war and the Lord gives you victory and you see a woman that you like, you can take her home as your wife. So already you're married. Now, because of the instance in which you got her in,
can we follow this thing?
Sure, as you says. So, number one, when you go into war and the Lord delivers the enemy into your hands, you take them captive, and you see a beautiful woman that has you desire, you can take her as your wife. Done already. So she
No. Please.
It doesn't say slave.
Listen,
It doesn't say concubine. You take her as your wife.
You want to take her as a wife. It is still
No,
intention.
it doesn't say you want to take her.
Wait. Deliver them unto thy hand, and thou hast taken them captive, and see a beautiful captive, beautiful woman, and as a desire unto her, thou will have her to thy wife.
Yes.
You have desire to let her be your wife. That's what he said.
No, that's not what it's saying. It's actually saying two things. Number one, you have an attraction to the woman, so you take her as your wife. That's all it's saying.
See, if you follow the trend,
Yeah. If you want, we can even read it in like regular ESV, if KJV.
No, you can pull it up. I don't mind.
It's right there.
It's still the same.
It's right here. So, right here, and then just do.
Let me use.
But that's what I'm saying though. If I'm
AMP, I mean, just do the.
Okay.
Wouldn't you be irritated?
When you go into battle against your enemies, and the Lord your God hands over to you, and you lead them away into captivity, and you see a beautiful woman among the captives, and desire her, and would take her as your wife. So you see her, you desire her as your wife.
Listen, so you can see that this desire,
Yep.
it covers you desire to take her as your wife, and for you to understand very well. That is why when he says, and she shall take off the clothes of whatever we have gone that. He said, but it shall here. After that, you may go into her and be her husband and shall be your wife.
Yes.
You know it
So
was at that point
married
in
her.
time. No.
The marriage is
If you see what he says here is that when you have sexual relationship with her,
suddenly she becomes your wife?
yes, that's what he's saying.
No,
Listen,
that's not how Jewish law
after
works.
that, you may go into her.
That's incorrect.
Yes.
Right. That would be incorrect.
If you follow it sequentially,
yes.
And I'm going to ask you a question. If you disagree with the interpretation, it says, after that you may go into her. That's after sexual relation. And her and be.
That's not compulsory.
Listen, and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. When you say after having a sexual relationship with somebody, it makes it that after that she has become your wife.
That's not how Jewish law works. So that would be an incorrect interpretation. Because then now any act of so for example, when David slept with Bathsheba, even though she was married, she just became his wife. So all of a sudden, that's not how it works.
We are talking about slave captivity. Yeah?
So even with slave captivity,
talking about slave captivity.
This is not how slave captivity
no,
works.
I will give you some other.
Because it literally in Deuteronomy 21, you're told that you cannot abuse the foreigner. So slave captives might be foreigners and you can't abuse them. It is saying that after she has been in your house for a month and has pruned her nails and cut her hair, then at that moment in time,
at that point in time,
you can your wife? Consummate. So she's been your wife since you brought her into the house. You can consummate with her, but it shall be that if you no longer delight in her,
no, before you go there, that's verse 13. Verse 13. It says, after that, you may go into her. Let's leave that.
You may go is optional, correct?
Wait,
so for example, after that,
I agree.
You don't have to go into her.
Yes, because I agree with you.
And that's because if you don't delight in them.
Listen,
that's why.
I agree with that. And he said, and be her husband,
and she'll be your wife.
Yes. And she'll be your. Why is he saying be her husband? With she has already become your husband or wife.
So even within Jewish as well as Christian theology, at least in the way we do a marriage, right? You can marry somebody.
Betroth.
No, you can actually marry somebody, right? No, betrothal though is when you are both agreeing that you have the intention to marry each other. However, consummation of marriage, for lack of a better term, seals the deal. That is why, for example, within I believe the Catholic tradition, if you marry somebody but you have not yet had sex with them, and then something goes wrong in the relationship, the marriage can be annulled as opposed to you going into divorce. So in the same capacity here, if you have brought her into your house as your wife for a month and you have not had sex with her, right, then you are still married, but the consummation is not taking place. He has to seal the deal. And that's how it works in Jewish church as well.
What I read is that for a captive woman, she will need to perform some rites, which are all the changing of the clothes and whatever, which is Jewish law, not necessarily for the captive, but these are the things when you are bringing somebody into the tent.
Yeah, but the reason why she's shaving her hair isn't a Jewish practice.
It is.
It's not.
For purification.
She's mourning
I can give you
family.
No, because no, it's two different things. For purification, if you are bringing a stranger into the tent, you need to go through purification law. I can give you
look at why it says.
Listen. You have to go through the purification, and the purification is shaving your hair and all those stuff. That is the first thing. The second one is that because you have gone into a battle and people have lost their life, it is also Jewish law. You have to mourn for a month, not because they are slaves, but that is the standard law. However, you have seen somebody in the battle, you desire her, you want her to be your wife, bring her into the house. After she has done all this, then go into her. If you like her, go. I'm not saying it is there like that, but I said go into her.
No, it says you may.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you go
now, because it's a may.
Let me finish.
Okay.
Let's say may. You may go into her. When you go into her, she becomes your husband and wife.
Okay.
That is, if you enjoy her. However, if you go into her and you do not enjoy her, that's why it says in verse 14, but it shall be that if you have no delight and take no pleasure in her. Why is he saying that?
If you no longer like her after a month.
If you don't enjoy the sexual relationship with her.
Okay, here's my question then.
Okay.
Because it is a conditional clause that you may go in on her. What happens after a month if you don't go in on her? She just stays in your house forever, or you can still let her go without going in on her?
So fine, you know this thing, they are Jewish law. They are law of God. Okay. And the law of God, you have to just practicalize it. You have to go about it. God did not say if you desire somebody and you bring her to your house, you have to leave her just like that.
What if after a month?
If you desire to just keep her like that, then she's there.
Okay.
As your slave. Okay. Then it means that you don't have intention of marrying her. Somebody else can like her and come to your house and say, I desire this woman. Can you please let me marry her?
Because in the second instance, since it's conditional, you have not consummated.
Yes.
And after a month, you no longer want her.
Yes.
Can't you still let her go?
You can let her go. Okay. In that case, you can sell her.
Now,
you can sell her in that case.
You wouldn't sell her.
No, you wouldn't sell her if you had already slept with her.
Well, no, there is nothing saying that you can only not sell somebody.
It's there.
Step with them.
Verse 14. But it shall be that if you have no delight and take no pleasure in her, then you shall let her go wherever she wishes.
Yes.
You have certainly shall not sell her for money.
Yep.
You shall not deal with her as a slave or mistreat her, because you have humbled her by forced marriage.
Right, but you see, the forced marriage already occurred when she came into the tent, not when you consummate.
No, what determines the marriage is the sexual relationship.
Well, no, that's what consummates, aka seals the deal. But you can still be married and not have sex.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. If a slave is captured, and you bring the slave home, you took care of her, nice clothes and everything.
Well, let's give her regular clothes, but whatever.
Yes, nice clothes. Make her clean and everything. Have you humiliated her?
Well, you have by for example, you've taken her almost as a captive, really. You've taken her as a captive, so that is a humiliating thing. And then you've had her shave off her hair. So what if in her own culture the hair was seen as like a symbol of beauty?
Fine.
And you've uglied her.
Fine, but that is not the humiliation. That's the reason why I told you that. It is Jewish law, not the law is actually the law of shaving or money is actually not meant for the captive, but because you are bringing this captive into the tent, she has to go through those rituals. So the humiliation is that you are forced to have sexual relationship with her, because the woman that you brought into your house, she may not like it. And you have slept with her, Okay, do you know there's another instance? Let me just quote this. I may not have the quotation.
Notice that because of the conditional clause of the may,
Okay.
it doesn't specify what happens if you don't end up sleeping with her. So that
Yes,
that
yes.
would mean that the outcome that is specified in 14 would be the same whether or not you slept with her or not.
If you don't sleep with her, she's not your wife. She can't be your wife.
And then you can still let her go if you don't like her.
But you can sell her either. You can sell
Well,
her.
it doesn't say if you don't go in on her, you can sell her. It doesn't say
The
that.
reason why, because if you look at other verses,
I can show you other verses.
no, yeah,
For example, Numbers
I can
25.
also show you other verses.
Go for it. Go for it. I
So
can figure
let
out
me
as well.
say, let me say,
I'll show you Numbers
there's
25.
a situation. I don't have it offhand, but if you can remind me,
Maybe. I can
there's
try.
this Jewish law that says if a man sell his daughter as a slave
Yeah.
to a man, and when you sold it to the man had sexual relationship with her,
Yeah.
and you are no longer interested in her.
Who's the you? The woman?
The man,
the man who bought the woman. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't have interest in her.
Yep.
It says you cannot sell her because you have sexual relationship with her.
Right, but notice that,
Wait,
the
let me
man
finish.
would be Jewish, and so would
Yes,
the woman.
yes.
But then in this instance, it's talking about non-Jewish captives.
Yes,
there are differences in laws for non-Jewish captives and Jewish captives.
Same.
So it's not the same application.
No, it's the same. The reason why it is the same is this: you are bringing her to your tent, meaning that she has to be subjected to those ritual something. That makes it that she has complied to that Jewish law, and that's the reason why she has to shave her hair and she has to mourn for that period of time. You cannot come to any Jewish tent without being purified. A Gentile is not seen as somebody that is clean. So for you to enter the tent, you need to be purified.
Okay.
So you are going to be like a Jewish person. However, in that former case, it says if you have not slept with her, okay, it's possible you can sell her. However, if you have slept with her, you cannot. So it is the same way that now you have brought this woman, a non-Gentile, a non-Jew, into the tent. She has observed all the things in the sight of God because she wants to be your wife. God is going to measure her up as a Jewish because all the Jewish culture she has to.
She might not want to be your wife.
Yes, that's the fault. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I said the other time that in slave, when you take a captive, they do not have choice again. They lose all the privileges and everything. And that's why in Islam, when the state brings a slave to you,
Can I borrow that for 1 second?
when a slave is brought to you, is entrusted to you, you are supposed to integrate her into the society. If you want to marry her, because in Islam, for you to marry, you have to seek the consent of the guardian. You have become the guardian of that person already. So that's the reason why if you desire to have sexual relationship with her, you can. And that's the reason why if that slave to give birth, you have a child for you, that child becomes legitimately yours. And all the inheritance that all your children can have, she will also took part in that something. So the idea of God saying that the slave that your right hand possess is because of the fact that they have lost all that freedom. Your money, your estate, even your family, your children, they are no longer yours once you have captured. And that is the same thing here that is being demonstrated to us in the book of Deuteronomy. They lose all the rights and they are going to be on their own.
So we don't agree with that understanding of the treatment of slaves, because even within the context of the Old Testament, God tells them that do not mistreat the foreigner, because you were once foreigners in the land of Egypt. So the idea of them losing all of their rights when they become captives, that will be an example of, for example, a chattel slavery. And the Bible does not preach or believe in chattel slavery. And then when you come into the New Testament era, we have things, for example, like in the writings of Paul, in both Galatians and Philemon, where in Galatians, Paul tells us that there is no Greek, there is no slave, there is no man, there is no woman, there is no Jew, there is no Gentile. All are one in Christ. And the entirety of the letter of Philemon that Paul writes is when he meets a slave in jail who was running away from his master. And then the slave is due to be released. So he writes, and the slave is a Christian. So he writes a letter to the slave and the slave's master, asking him to receive the slave back, not as a slave, but as a brother. So ultimately, there's a reason why the ending of slavery didn't come out of the Islamic context. It came out of the Christian context. Because while there were certain civilizations in the past that would restrict slavery in some case to people of a certain class or people of a certain sex, there was never a civilization that went around the world ending it in other countries. So ultimately, within the context that we have in Christianity, there are certain failures that you see in Islam where, for example, when you talk about a slave being entrusted to her master, what if it's a male slave and a female master? There is still not an allowance for the female master to go and have intercourse with the male slave if she is married.
Okay.
So very clearly, this is not a two-way street.
Okay, no, and I will tell you something. Number one is, what if a female master and has a male slave?
Yeah.
The idea is that you want to integrate somebody into the society, and you understand that in a family setup, the family is always under the father.
5 minutes. Can you round up in 5 minutes?
Yeah.
The family is always under the father. A woman who has been having the protection of her husband will actually not want a male slave to have sexual relationship with her. Why? Because that's something that can translate into her being pregnant. And when she is pregnant, who is the owner of the baby? Unlike when it is the man and a female slave, when it translates into pregnancy, it shows that woman has become part and parcel of the family. You have been integrated into the family. And again, Islam does not treat slaves as just like what you have said the other time, but they are brothers. Let me finish. They are brothers to us. They are everything to us. When I said they have lost all the right, let me pose the question to you. When a slave is captured during the time of the Israelites, and you have your property, do you still have right over that your property? So you lose that your property.
So wait, sorry. The slave is captured.
Yeah.
And their
in war.
property. Do they lose the right over it?
Yes. That's the question.
Okay, fine, sure. They can lose their property.
That is what I'm talking about.
No,
wait.